a similar trajectory, by the way, right? Sort of making himself an official out of whole cloth. Mordechai, right? When Mordechai is introduced, what's his job? Oh, he's a Jew, right? That's his job. We're not told anything about him. But what happens, right? He's very protective of Esther. Esther gets taken to the palace. What does he need to do, right? He goes to the palace or to the women's palace every single day to inquire about her. Now, should he be allowed to do this? Right? How much contact do you think the women in the women's palace are allowed to have with men on the outside?
Well, he's not talking to her directly.
He's not talking to her directly. So what does he need to do, right? Presumably through, right, internal connections, bribes, manipulating the system, he's able to get contact with her. He's able to have a dialogue with her, and they're able to communicate. And to the point where, right, what happens 3 years later, right, he's showing up to the gate every single day in order to, talk to people and exchange and barter for information. By the time Esther becomes queen, what's Mordechai's job?
Lower official.
He's an lower official. He's Yoshev B'Shar HaMelech, right? He is the guy, right? The king is in the inner chamber with his most important officials. There's the medium level officials in the outside courtyard, and then by the gate, all the way on the outside, are the people who interact with the people of Shushan. And Mordechai sort of gets this job.
Is he hired by Achashverosh?
So it's a little bit unclear. So you can look at it kind of as a joke, right? It's like the joke of like, how'd you get the job? Well, I just showed up every day, and eventually they gave me a paycheck, right? Right? It could be like sort of an ironic critique of the Persian bureaucratic system, or it could be a tribute to Mordechai, basically saying he was so good at his job and people had so much respect for him that sort of de facto he became a judge. Right, he became a Yoshev B'Shar HaMelech.
Maybe he wanted to because he wanted to be on the premises.
Exactly.
And he had those connections anyway to do that or something.
Exactly. And so Mordechai we know has excellent connections to the point where Mordechai knows what's going on in the inner chamber of the king. Mordechai knows what's going on. How do we know that? Well, Mordechai and Haman have themselves a nice little discussion. Right? Haman says, there's this people, they're lousy people, and I want to take care of them. Well, we'll get into exactly what Haman says in a few minutes. And he says, I will weigh out 10,000 talents of silver, and then the king says, I'll give you the money. Right, again, what exactly is going on there is a little bit confusing. But, we'll put that aside for the moment. We'll get into that later. And then the king hands Haman his ring. Haman has the decree. Now, the decree, does it say anything about 10,000 talents and the king could give? None of that stuff's in the decree. And yet, when Mordechai has the conversation with Hatach, who is the representative who's going back and forth between Esther and Mordechai, what does it say? Right? In the beginning of chapter 4, in chapters 4 and 1 and 4:7, 4:1 says, Mordechai yadat kol asher nasa. Mordechai knew everything that was going on.
Before Esther knew.
So, right, before even Esther knew. So that's a little ambiguous. Maybe it just means he knew that there had been a decree. But if you look at 4:7, right, what does it say? Vayaged lo Mordechai, et kol asher karahu, right? Mordechai told him everything that happened. They had parashat hakesef asher amar Haman lishkol ginzei hamelech. Even to the amount of money that Haman said he was going to weigh out, right? This isn't recorded anywhere, this isn't written anywhere, and yet Mordechai knows what's going on in the inner chamber of the king, right? We can speculate as to why this would be, whether he has, good relations with servants, or whatever it may be, but clearly both Haman and Mordechai are extremely well-connected individuals in a bureaucracy that has a serious bottleneck at the top. Okay, moving forward, right, we now get to the most vexing question of Rabbi Shalom. And the first of his two major bomb chidushim, I would say. And this is the first of them, right? The question is, right, and this is the question we were talking about last week, why on earth won't Mordechai bow down to Haman? Right? What happens? Mordechai comes, and he's sitting there, and Haman says, all right, there's a decree from the king, everybody who's Yoshev B'Shar HaMelech needs to bow down to me. Mordechai is Yoshev B'Shar HaMelech. Why won't he bow down to him? Like we talked about, right? It doesn't say anything in the text about Avodah Zarah. It doesn't say anything in the text about having an idol around his neck or in his jacket. None of that stuff. Even if that were the case, it may very well be that he was allowed to do it anyway, right? It's a very strange thing. And of course, we have plenty of biblical precedent for people bowing down to other people, right? Moshe bows down in front of Yitro, and Avram bows down in front of Nechei. Bowing down is not a rare event for people in the Torah. Not only that, but it says, right, Lo Yachrav Lo Yishtach. He won't even bend up. Again, if you want to say bending down all the way is some sort of inappropriate thing which is reserved for God, he won't even bend his knees, not even make some sign of respect. Right? Why not? So Rav Shalom suggests, right, if you'll notice that there's interesting language that gets used. How do we know that everyone's supposed to bow down to Mordechai who is at the outer gate? Well, first of all, let's think about that for a second. Does that make sense? Right? Would the king want everybody bowing just at the outer gate to bow down in front of Haman, right? Why should people bow down in front of Haman? If it's because he's the most important official in the land, who should bow down to him? Everybody should bow down to him. Right? If it's just a sign of respect, everyone should bow down to him. Why just the people at the outer gate? And what does it say, right? How do we know that the king commanded this? It says, Kichein siva lo hamelech. Now the word lo is a bit ambiguous, right? The word lo can mean, thus the king commanded about him, or it can mean, thus the king commanded to him. In other words, you can read this Megillah as saying, what happened? Haman went around saying, okay, everybody, I, the prime minister, just came out of a meeting with the king, and the king said, everybody who's in the outer gate has to bow down before me. Now, what do we know about the king and decrees? When the king does a decree, how does the decree work? Right? How do we know about this decree? Is there any like pomp and circumstances? And
Sends letters.
there's 100, right? That was there's 127 runners to all, and it's all the different languages. And right about this decree, are there runners? Are there languages? Nothing. It's just Kichein siva lo hamelech. Okay, curious. Second of all, right? Why would there be benefit to Haman for the people in the outer gate bowing before him? Well, who's at the outer gate? The minor officials and
Mordechai.
well, well, Mordechai is one of the minor officials, but who else, right? It's the meeting place between the minor officials and who else can come to the outer gate who can't come inside the palace? The regular people. The regular people. So what's going to happen? Who's going to see everybody bowing down before? Who's going to see all the officials of the government bowing down before Haman? The people. The masses are going to see this exactly, right? So what does this sound like? It sounds like a person who's angling for mass appeal, right? And again, this could be completely legitimate.
Why would the king tolerate that?
Right. Why? So, but here's the thing, right? Imagine you're an official, right? So if you're a lower official who's on the outside, who certainly can't even see the face of the king, what's your reaction going to be, right? Are you going to say, I think that this is a problem. I know. I'll go to my boss, right? First of all, you're taking a big risk here because you're basically trying to tattle on the prime minister. But even if you did, you went to your boss. His boss went to his boss. His went to his boss. Eventually, whose desk is it going to wind up at? Well, before the king, Haman's. It's going to wind up at Haman's desk. He's the prime minister. Right? There's no. How are you supposed to navigate this? Right? He's not worried that other people. Now, he doesn't want the innermost people to do it because then the king might become aware of it because those are people who might be better connected, and there's no advantage to that happening. So what happens? Mordechai says, "I'm calling shenanigans on this." Right? It's the way things work as a matter of law, right? If there's a law and you don't like it, in America today, there's a law and you don't like it. You can't just say, I don't like that law, I'm going to challenge it in court.
So wait, in other words, Mordechai doesn't believe this really originated.
Right, Mordechai is saying, I don't believe that this is actually a command of the king. Right, but how is he going to challenge it? He can't just publicly declare, I don't believe it, if there's a law in America, or in New York State, right? You can't just say, I don't like that law, I'm going to sue. Right, what do you need to do? Sorry?
Pick it.
Well, I mean, you can pick it all you want, but that won't give you the right to challenge it in court. If you want the right to challenge it in court, what do you need to have?
You have to violate the law to get arrested.
You need to get arrested. It's not even enough to violate it, right? You can violate it all you want, as long as you don't. You need standing. In order to get standing, you need to be arrested. You need to be involved in the process. Now,
something.
So the unintentional pun, but it works nicely. How does Mordechai get standing? By standing, right? He refuses to bow down to Haman. Now again, Haman, how does Haman get to work? Does he walk to work every day from his home, right? And especially in this environment where people are worried about assassins. In general, how did people in high officials? Well, not a chariot, but close, right? On a closed litter, right? You would have people who would, you bum a chair and people would carry you. That's how you would get around, right? That was sort of the segue of the ancient world, right? So when it says Haman didn't see, is it right? How did Haman not see, right? Everybody's bowing down to him. So it could just be he was really self-involved and he only cared about the adulation and he didn't care about anything that didn't affect that. But Haman presumably is inside a closed litter.
I don't buy that the king doesn't know anything going out there. I don't buy that he doesn't walk out on a balcony and he doesn't look out of the window of the palace.
Well, I mean, if you look from a historical standpoint, right, any time, right, for the kings of Babylonia, like when they're depicted, they have a screen in front of them, right, and the historians will record that whenever they're at a public event, there's an opaque screen in order that people should not see them. We'll talk next week about why that would be the case, right? There's a very good reason why that would be the case, not just security.
Not like the Pope?
Sorry?
It's not like the Pope.
Not like the Pope. Yes, but there is a very good reason why that would be the case. So Mordechai refuses to bow, and so what happens? Right, all the people around are now really interested because this is an act of rebellion, especially because Mordechai seems to be doing it because he doesn't believe it's an actual command of the king. So they start talking. Eventually, word reaches Haman's ears, and right again, a very cute pun. Right, they tell him because they want to know Haya'amo divrei Mordechai, whether the words of Mordechai will stand. Again, sort of a cute pun on standing. So what happens? Right, Mordechai, what does Haman do? Right, the first thing before Haman reacts is he wants to know, right, this guy who's not bowing before me, right, is he from some like ancient, important, Shushan family? Is he well connected? Right, maybe, right, Haman is relatively a new kid on the block. He's not, old money, so maybe that's why they're upset. And what does he find out? Who's not bowing to him? It's a Jew, right? It's these people from exile who have they're nothings from nobody. This is some guy who got the job last week. This is the guy who's challenging him. And Haman is furious. But he's also a little bit frightened. Why? Because what is Mordechai doing? Mordechai is saying, look, right, we're in Persia, we're in the land of laws, everybody consults the laws, no problem. If you want to punish me for not following the dot of the king, all you have to do is produce the dot, right? Just show me the thing, and you can have, the guards can haul me away, right? Mordechai's taking a huge risk here out of loyalty to the king. But, of course, Haman can't produce the dot because there is no dot to produce. So, what does he do, right? How does Haman respond? Again, remember, Haman is an excellent manipulator. So what does he do? He goes to the king and gets the entire people of Mordechai destroyed. How he's going to do that, we'll talk in a second. But let's talk about why. Right? Why does he want to kill all the people of Mordechai? Well, first of all, what kind of a message does it send?
To all nations, you have to obey me.
Right? Don't mess with Haman. Right? Don't mess with Haman. He's not going to come after you. He will come after your entire family, your entire people, everything. Right? Second of all, it completely avoids the problem of him having to produce a dot. He doesn't need to produce a dot anymore. There's a much better dot right here that says you have to kill everybody. Right? So what he's doing is he's taking this situation, which is very small, and making it very big, making it into a national security crisis. Right? What does he do? He goes before the king. He says there are these people, and they're scattered and dispersed, and they don't listen to the king, and we need to deal with them. And we'll get into the exact language in a second. But, right? Isn't that a big risk, right? Why would Haman think that taking a minor personal issue and turning it into a huge national security crisis would work? Was there any precedent for that with King Ahasuerus, taking a personal slight and turning it into a huge national crisis? Vashti! That's exactly what happened to Vashti. Again, that's part of the reason why Chazal pick up on Haman being Memuchan, because it was Memuchan who did this exact same thing just a few prakim earlier. What happens? There's this minor little slight, and they're like, oh, it's not just an insult, it's for all the husbands everywhere, we can have a crazy rebellion. Right? So that's how Haman solves his Mordechai problem. So what does the Haman do? He goes before the king, and of course, he can't just say, I want to mass murder hundreds of thousands of people. Right? Because the king is going to want a little more information than that.
Not sure.
Also...
Not sure about this king that he wants so much information.
Well, possibly, but certainly from Haman's actions, right? And not only that, right? So what does Haman do? Haman does something very cute. And again, this is the second of Early Shalom's very, very big Chiddushim, right? So he says, what does Haman do? He comes before the king. And first of all, he doesn't say the name of the people. Because again, nobody really knows where the king stands in this whole Jews situation necessarily. Right? Often in court, you'll sometimes see this, where there's one question that a witness knows the answer to that will completely destroy the case, right? In either direction, right? Like this witness knows either the light was red or the light was green, and that will completely destroy the case. So what happens? Both sides, right? The plaintiff and the defense are both trying to ask around it as much as they can without asking that one question because they don't know where it's going to come out. So what does Haman do? He goes before the king and he says, there's this little people, well actually he says that there's a strange people and they're scattered all over the place